So we always begin with opening prayers. So we have some short opening prayers that we will recite that are pretty much accepted by all the different Buddhist groups. So we'll screen share that. Debbie is going to screen share that for us. And then we'll recite that together. She's going to recite the opening prayers. Everybody should recite on their own, but please mute your microphone so that we don't have a cacophony of feedback being generated as we try and do this. But it's important to recite these things out loud together. Okay, so Debbie, when you're ready, please go ahead.
Are you seeing the altruistic motivation on your screen?
Yes, we are.
Yes, very good. Yes.
Okay. We will do these 3 times in English. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who wish to create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. All mother sentient beings, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and omniscience. May they experience happiness, be separated from suffering, and swiftly I will establish them in the state of unsurpassed, perfect, complete, and precious Buddhahood. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Thus, until I achieve enlightenment, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I perform virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. In the Buddha, the Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until enlightenment is reached. By the merit of generosity and other good deeds, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, boundless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion.
Very good. Thank you very much. So thank you all for joining us tonight. And we've been looking forward to this for a long time. And so glad that we're all together doing this. And may it bring happiness to us all and good fortune to us all and enlightenment to us all and to all our circle of friends and family and people that we don't know. So may it benefit all beings and all activities for the benefit of the enlightenment of all sentient beings. So thank you very much for joining us. So if anybody has questions as we go along, I don't mind being interrupted. The format is going to be that we are going to read sections in sequential order of the text, of the root text, which is in the Pecha text. Debbie has made a map of the pages that coincide with the book that was published. Here it is. With this book here, if you have this book or you have the paperback version of this, the mapping that she did, the page mapping, goes along with this hardbound book. The paperback, I'm not so sure that the pages are going to be the same. But so if you don't have the Pecha text, the one that we have here, then the pages in her mapping coincides with that. So Debbie, if you can have that, if you can put that in the chat, if you haven't already, and people can see that, maybe they can download it and they can print it for their use later on. Tonight, we're not going to get real deep into the book at all, so I don't think it's going to be an issue for anybody. I want to go over a few things with the book, with the table of contents. So the first first two pages, I and double I here, and just make sure that everybody is kind of familiar with the structure of the book. So this all comes from the Dorje Gourmet book, has been extracted from the Dorje Gourmet book, and was all, composed by Guru Rinpoche Padmasambhava, and was written down, as the story goes, written down by Yeshe Sogil, his main consort, and then was buried according to his instructions, and was later discovered in the 16th century by excuse me a second, Karma Lingpa. So, and then since then it has become a very famous and very sought after text, and this Pecha text like this in many families in Tibet is like an heirloom, is something that is handed down from one generation to the next. And as people pass away, that they invite the lamas to come and recite the Bardo Thodol for their dying family members or those who have passed and so on. The lamas may bring, of course, their own text, but the families have these texts, and they're considered, they may be the only book that they do have. So it's very precious to have this book. Of course, it's a book not just for the dying, but it's a book for the living, because as we develop our understanding of this book, we realize that we always need to be prepared to pass when we least expect it. And so that the idea here is to be able to um, prepare ourselves for Dharmakaya, to prepare ourselves for the Bardo of reality. That there are 6 Bardos, and we are living in the Bardo of living, and so on. So we're going to talk about that in a few minutes. So, so this book then is divided into several sections. So the first part is the daily prayers and recitations that are recited before death. So we will recite the opening prayers. We just did our opening prayers, but then we will recite these daily prayers um, from the book, from Padmasambhava. We'll recite those each day to establish a stream of consciousness so that we're tuned in to the Bardo Thodol. And then we will begin reading through the natural liberation of habitual tendencies and so on. We will skip, for the time being, we will skip the daily main practice. I'm looking at the table of contents right now. We'll skip the daily main practice, which includes the 8 great projectoresses and the Ishvari. We will come back to that last. We'll come back to that after we've gone through the whole book. And then you'll see the relevance of what this daily practice is, because it's like kind of an empirical version, a daily practice version of the Bardo Thodol. So we'll come back to that later on. Then it says the daily aspirational prayer for assistance, that we will recite that each time. Then we will begin with part 1, which is the elucidation of the intermediate state of the time of death and the appearance of the peaceful deities in the intermediate state of reality. So we'll go through that, where it talks about the time of death recitation and the daily recitations after the death. And then you see the peaceful deity families that are experienced during the first 7 days of the Bardo of reality experience. So we'll be moving into those, talking about those. So the idea is that we have 2 hours in each of these sessions, so that we will read a section and then we will discuss that section. And then when we finish our discussion, then we'll move on to the next section, and then we'll discuss that, so that each 2-hour meeting has a liveliness to it. Everybody can participate, everybody can speak, and so on. Everybody can ask questions about the small section. So we're not going to go through the whole book and so on, and try and do that in one sitting. Then when we finish part 1, then we'll go to part 2, and that is an elucidation of the appearance of the wrathful deities in the intermediate state of reality. So we'll go through that, and you see that there's day 8 through all the way through days 37 are included in part 2. So this is where a lot of questions, I think, are going to come up. A lot of people may be unfamiliar with this. We have some illustrations that you will find very useful. We have mandalas that we can use to help us to understand the relationship of all these things, the peaceful mandala and the wrathful mandala and the mandala, the Vidyadhara, and so on. So we'll make those available to everybody as we progress. I can mail them to people through shipping through the U.S. Post Office. If you want to give me your mailing addresses, we can also make them available through email. I can send them, if you all have the ability to print in color. So these are very good. They're very detailed. And if you don't have a good color printer, then it may be worthwhile to take it to a nearby printer and pay a few dollars to have it done. Or, as I say, I'll be more than glad to mail it to you. but it will be something that will help you in your practice and study of the Bardo Thodol as you move forward. Because I imagine that this is something that is going to be part of your lifestyle of your Buddhist practice moving forward. This is the intention of Padmasambhava, to do this on a daily basis. So then when we finish part 2, then we'll move on to part 3, which is the elucidation of the intermediate state of rebirth. So this is a very, very powerful part of being able to visualize what it is to be reborn into the realms, hopefully as a human being. And so this will take us through day 38 through day 49. So there's, as you see, 49 days that this is traditionally recited. At the conclusion of each session, then, we will also recite the concluding daily prayers. So the aspirational prayer that rescues from the dangerous pathways and the aspirational prayer that protects from fear. So these 4 prayers, the 2 opening prayers and the 2 closing prayers, the 2 aspirational prayers, should be recited every day. They're very powerful, and they really keep your mindfulness on our fragility, that death can come to us at any time, and that we are preparing ourselves for that death in such a way that when death comes, we may not even recognize it, because our heart mind is so much in the Bardo and in the Dharmakaya that we don't even are connected. We're not even realizing what is happening to our physical body, to our intellectual body, and so on. That we are already in the Buddha nature. So when traditionally what happens when someone passes, that this book is read, if someone is passing, the lamas or the spiritual friends, it may not be lamas, because sometimes lamas are not available. And sometimes it's a family member, sometimes it's a friend, sometimes it's a spiritual friend, it's a lay person who is familiar with this, is requested to come and lead the Bardo Thodol. And as it's explained in the commentary of the Tibetan Book of the Dead here, this is normal practice. This is not unusual practice. So we have the ability to be able to do that. And the more that we do it, the more confident we get in this, the more stable we get in our understanding of this, and so on. So it's most important that these things are done. If it can't be done by an ordained, then it can be done by a lay person. And we follow along, we read ourselves, and so on. So this happens for 49 days once the person has passed, and is the tradition that it's normally done in. Sometimes it's not practical. Sometimes it's only done on weekends, sometimes on just Sunday, sometimes just in the beginning, and sometimes at the end. It all depends on the family's culture and the way that they think about it. There's no hard, fast rule about this, but those that can do this every day for someone who has passed is very, very powerful, very, very meaningful. And we'll explore that. We'll talk a lot about that. I've read this for family members and for friends over the years many times. I've read this for all 49 days. And so it's very powerful. This actually was the first translation, English translation by Evans Wentz, was done in 1923. I came upon it in 1971, and it was the first of the Tibetan Buddhist books that I encountered, and read it then and was immediately captivated by it. And I've made it my main study since then. So it's to me, it is if We have all the Buddhist texts, all the Buddhist teachings, all the sutras and all the tantras and all the practices and so on, which is like a huge jigsaw puzzle for us here in the West. And not growing up with this in our culture, and it's like taking a 2,000 piece jigsaw puzzle and spilling it out on the table and having to sort through and see how the pieces go together without a picture. So first we find the straight edge pieces and we find the corner pieces and we create the frame. That's relatively easy. But then after that, then we have to really examine all the interior pieces and see how they fit together. And it's a trial and error. Sometimes we try and force some things together. Sometimes it may appear to work, but then we find later on, that those pieces don't go together. This other piece here is the proper one to go with this piece, and so on like that. So we see that, we recognize that, we accept that as Western people, we're bringing this into our lifestyle and so on. So that illustration of it being like a 2,000 piece jigsaw puzzle is very good simile. However, we have to take that puzzle and we have to put it on a surface. We have to put it on a table. That table is the Bardo Thodol. By having the table, all the other things begin to fall into place. It becomes the foundation for all the other practices. We see why we do all the other practices through the Bardo Thodol. So it's very, very, very important, very fundamental. And this is why Padmasambhava, when he composed this, said, people are not ready for this. This should be a Dharma text buried. And then when people are ready for it, then it will be discovered. So when Karma Lingpa discovered it, then obviously things were ready to be able to, for people to be able to understand. And then with what has happened with the Tibetans in the past 60 years or so, then it is slowly being disseminated all around the world. And so it's our fortune to be able to receive this and to be able to practice this, to be able to learn this. So that's a little bit of an introduction. If anybody has any questions, don't hesitate to ask, please. Like I said, I don't mind being interrupted. So what I would like to do,
Lance,
yes,
on this series, it's got daily prayers and it's got continuing daily prayers. They've got from 207 to 218
yes,
on the continuing daily prayers.
yes.
But I'm confused as to what it is that we're supposed to recite each day.
That would be page 1 through page 16.
1 through 16.
Yep. And excuse me. Yeah, that's right. Let me see here. Just let me make sure. Correct. Page 1 through page 16. So that would be the beginning of the opening prayers. Yes.
What about page 67
We'll get to that. We'll get to that. But this is the first part.
but that's one of the daily prayers that you mentioned?
Yes, and we'll get to that. Yes. So that is another one that we will get to. So like I said, this may be a little bit rough, explaining a few things, getting the structure of this so that everybody understands. So yes, we'll get to page 67 also. But the first 4 are the root verses, the 6 intermediate states, the natural liberation of habitual tendencies, the 10-branch prayer, and the purification prayer. So those are the first 2. And the last 2 are the aspirational prayers that are at the end of the book. And then we will get to the daily aspirational prayer for assistance. So, yes. Okay, so thank you for the question. Okay, everybody else all right? And oh, I want you to notice something else about the book, about the Pacher book that we put here. As you all may know, that a Pacher book is the traditional style of book that is done in the old country in Tibet, and it is it's on these long pieces of paper, and they don't have a binding on them, and they're generally done on wood blocks, and they have great artisans who are able to engrave the wood blocks for printing, and it's a very noble thing. These of course have been done through a regular printer and so on. We're done on through a word processor, and so at the time, this was before that you could do verbal recitation into your computer and have it type out, do the keystroking for you and type out. So everything here I had to do keystroking on. So it took a couple of years for me to complete this. So, but it was great practice. So, and I'm very happy to be able to share it with everybody. The artwork comes from a variety of places, and the artwork that's on both sides of each page, we try to have it be meaningful to what that particular page is referring to. So you'll notice that the artwork changes with each page, and lots of times it repeats. And if anybody has questions about that, don't hesitate to talk about that, to ask about that, and we'll try and make that available to you. If you notice that in this book here, there are several panels in here with excellent artwork. And that has been incorporated into this Pecha text as well. So the Pecha text is the traditional way of the Tibetan book. So for me, I thought it was really trying to stabilize the mind on the traditional way to do this, and so I chose to keep it this way instead of binding it in some kind of a book like that. So I hope you enjoy that. And these pictures can be available. They can be printed in 8.5 by 11 if you want them. If you request them, we can do that. So there's a number of things we can do for you to enhance your study of this. So it generally, when we read this, it takes me an hour, 4.5 hours to read the book from the beginning to the end. If I'm reading it every day for someone who has passed, and that's reading it quite sprightly, quite quickly, quite fast, keeping it totally intelligible. I'm not slurring words, but I am doing it quite quick. So to do it every day is quite an endeavor. So that is why the days are broken out. There are certain things that are repeated each day, but then certain things may be just focused on, 5 or 10 or 15, 20 pages for a given day, something like that. So what I would like to do is, as we continue now, is to call on people to read a certain section so that more and more people are involved in this recitation. And if anybody has a reluctance and doesn't want to do this, just say you'd rather pass, and that's fine. We'll move on to the next person. So we're just going to move with people that I can see on my screen here. Everybody's screen is a little bit different, the order in which things are. So if you don't get called on tonight, you'll maybe called on another time or something. And if you feel like you need to you really want to say something and you haven't done that, then just let me know and I'll make sure that you're called upon. So Anybody have any questions or comments? Okay, very good. So we're going to begin on page 1, the root verses of the intermediate states. So I'm going to read the italics just to give an introduction to this. And then I'm going to ask Curtis if you will read the first page. And then Thomas, if you will read the second page. And then French, if you will read the third page. And then Eileen, if you will read the fourth page. And then Jane and Jerry, if you will read the fifth page. And then William and Bhavani, if you will read the sixth page. That will take us through this root verses of the 6 intermediate states. And then we'll have a discussion at the end of that. And then we can go back at the beginning and talk about the meaning of each of these sections. Is that okay?
Lance,
Yes.
at the moment, I have just the bound book in front of me. So either you can pass over me, or while you start reading, I'll go and get the page of text, which I have in another room.
Well, if you can do it quickly, that'd be great. Why don't you do that? Okay, so we'll just give him a minute. And so the reason for, my reason for doing this in the first place was to make it easy, because the root text is all throughout this book with commentary, which is valuable, very valuable and very good. But to be able to do a study or to be able to do the recitation on a daily basis, it's a lot of page turning and finding where you are and so on like that. So having it this way would be exactly the way that the root text would be done in the traditional Tibetan text. So it just seemed to make more sense to me to be able to establish a stream of consciousness to develop through the study and the practice of the Bardo Thodol. One other note I'll make before we get further along, everybody gets set up, is the Bardo Thodol is the traditional name for this. The Tibetan Book of the Dead was actually coined by Evans Wentz in 1923, who was a scholar who went to Tibet and who was able to obtain translations, or he was able to obtain passages from the Bardo Thodol, and he was able to translate it into English. And maybe many of you have the translation that he did back in 1923. He called it the Tibetan Book of the Dead because the Egyptian Book of the Dead was very popular at that time, and from England and from the West and so on. And so it was very popular. So he kind of co-opted that name, the English, the Egyptian Book of the Dead, by calling it the Tibetan Book of the Dead. That's why he called it that, because people were already familiar with that idea that here was something that was being read at the time when someone was dead and in the afterlife, so to speak. The real translation of Bardo Thodol is on the cover page, if you haven't noticed it, is the great liberation by hearing in the intermediate state. So the Bardo is the intermediate state. They are the intermediate states, and we're going to get to talking about them in just a moment. And the great liberation by hearing is what the Thodol translates to in English. So that's a little bit of the history. I try not to refer to it as the Tibetan Book of the Dead, I prefer to call it the Bardo Thodol, or the Great Liberation by Hearing in the Intermediate State. So I think it's more proper to call it that. However, the popular meaning for many people is the Tibetan Book of the Dead. Okay, so thank you for bearing with me on this. All right, so I think Curtis was going to begin on page one. I was going to read the beginning. So this is the root verses of the 6 intermediate states. The 6 intermediate states are the Bardo. According to this cycle of teachings, the circle of birth and death can be seen as being composed of 6 intermediate states. These 6 modalities of existence are waking living state, dreaming, meditation, the time of death, and the 2 successive phases of the after-death state are defined in the glossary. This poem emphasizes the centrally important perspective that relates to each of these states. It is recommended that practitioners should memorize these verses and recite them repeatedly while reflecting on their meaning throughout their lives. So this comes from the text by Gourmet Dorje. So Curtis, if you will begin, please. But you got to turn your microphone on, please.
That always helps.
And everybody can read along with this out loud, or if you prefer to just follow along silently, but go ahead, please.
I bow down to the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities. Alas, now as the intermediate state of living arises before me, renouncing laziness, for which there is no time in this life, I must enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation. Taking perceptual experience and the nature of mind as the path,
I must cultivate actualization of the 3 Buddha bodies. Now, having obtained a precious human body this one time, I do not have the luxury of remaining on a distracted path. Alas, now as the intermediate state of dreams arises before me, renouncing the corpse-like insensitive sleep of delusion, I must enter free from distracting memories, the state of abiding nature of reality, cultivating the experience of inner radiance through the recognition, emanation, and transformation of dreams. I must not sleep like a beast, but cherish the experiential cultivation which mingles sleep with actual realization.
Alas, now as the intermediate state of meditative concentration arises before me, renouncing the mass of distractions and confusions, I must undistractedly enter a state which is devoid of subjective apprehension and free from the 2 extremes, and attain stability in the stages of generation and perfection. At this moment, having renounced activity, having attained a singular concentration, I must not fall under the sway of bewildering mental afflictions. Alas, now as the intermediate state of the time of death arises before me, renouncing all attachments, yearning, and subjective apprehension in every respect, I must undistractedly enter the path on which the oral teachings are clearly understood.
And eject my own awareness into the uncreated expanse of space. I immediately, upon separation from this compounded body of flesh and blood, I must know this body to be like a transient illusion. Alas, now as the intermediate state of reality arises before me, renouncing the merest sense of awe, terror, or fear, I must recognize all that arises to be awareness, manifesting naturally of itself. No such sounds, lights, and rays to be visionary phenomena of the intermediate state. At this moment, having reached this critical point, I must not fear the assembly of peaceful and wrathful deities which manifest naturally.
Alas, now as the intermediate state of rebirth arises before me, I must with one pointed intention concentrate my mind and resolutely connect with the residual potency of my virtuous past actions. I must obstruct the womb entrance and call to mind the methods of reversal. This is the time when perseverance and purity of perception are imperative. I must give up all jealousy and meditate on my spiritual teacher with consort.
From the mouth of the accomplished masters come these words, O you with your mind far away, thinking that death will not come, entranced by the pointless activities of this life. If you were to return empty-handed now, would not your life's purpose have been utterly confused? Recognize what it is that you truly need. It is a sacred teaching for liberation. So, should you not practice this divine sacred teaching, beginning from this very moment? And it is also said, if I choose not to take the oral teachings of the spiritual teacher to heart, am I not the deceiver of myself?
Very good. Thank you all. So this first part, I bow down to the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities. So we see that the peaceful deities are in the heart center, and the wrathful deities are in the intellectual center or in the brain. The peaceful deities are our true nature. Our emotions are in our brain, and they block, the emotions block the heart. So the wrathful deities are the emanations of the peaceful deities, direct emanations of the peaceful deities who have great wisdom, or excuse me, great compassion to be able to overcome or to be able to neutralize or to be able to deal with the negativity that is being presented within ourselves. So we'll talk much more about this. But so the peaceful deities and the wrathful deities, and sometimes I prefer the name the fierce deities rather than wrathful, because wrathful has a connotation to me to mean angry or hatred. And it's not like that. They're very compassionate. Their compassion is very fierce, which is different than, I think, being hateful. So, but it's emanation, so these emanations are coming from the heart center to work in the brain and the intellect to be able to help us to understand. So this is so now it says, alas, now in the intermediate state of living arises before me. This is our Bardo, the Bardo of living, the Bardo of awakening, the Bardo of living. Arises before me, renouncing laziness for which there is no time in this life. In other words, it's very easy for us to be able to make excuses why we don't need to be spiritual. Being spiritual is very subtle, and we really have to engage that. We have to seize the opportunities. It doesn't just naturally have to come to us because of priorities that we have. Our physical body creates immediate priorities for us. our intellect and our way of life, our having to deal with our families and our friends and our workplaces and society in general, has an immediate priority to it. We have to do that. And we have a tendency to suppress our spirituality to deal with the physical and to deal with the intellectual. But what we need to do is to be able to rise up our awareness of the spirituality and make that a priority, and stop making excuses of laziness that these other things are more important. And that's why I don't have time for my spirituality. So it says, I must enter the undistracted path of study, reflection, and meditation. So we know that these are the three phases, the three stages that lead to enlightenment. Listening to the teachings, studying the teachings, contemplating the teachings, reflecting on them, thinking about them, engaging in the practices, doing the practices, seeing the results of the practices, and then that all gives way to the meditation. And the meditation being the union between ourselves and our true nature, that everything has been removed, all the obstacles have been removed, and the clarity is now revealed, and we just see ourselves for what it is, the meditation. And then taking perceptual experience and the nature of mind as the path. So taking perceptual experience and the nature of mind as the path. So we perceive many, many things. We're spiritual beings, whether we realize it or not. And being able to recognize that and be able to allow the natural wisdom that we have within ourselves to come up is part of the path, the nature of mind as the path. I must cultivate actualization of the three Buddha bodies. So the three Buddha bodies are the Dharmakaya, the Sambhogakaya, and the Nirmanakaya. Now, having obtained a precious human body this one time, this is the only time that we can count on. Whatever happened in the past is gone. Maybe it led us to where we are now, but now we have this life, and what's going to happen tomorrow or next life, we can't be sure. So the only thing that we have to work with is this life. And I do not have the luxury of remaining on a distracted path. So we have to focus. So this is in the Bardo of living, our current Bardo. So does anybody have questions, comments? Please speak right up.
As could you elaborate what they mean by perceptual experience?
I think what it means is that, as I said, we are all spiritual beings already. You know, we already are enlightened. We have enlightenment with us. We are already Buddha. The Buddha taught that we have the Buddha potential. And when the conditions are right, all of a sudden it comes up. We do things. We think things. We may say things that are that wisdom, that true nature, that those enlightened things. And so it comes to us maybe as perceptions. Say, I don't know this, but I perceive this to be true. There is something here that really rings true. And when I think about it, when I talk to other people about it, they agree with me and we can have conversations about it. But yet I may not have really understanding of what it is, but I have a perception of this. So I think it's recognizing that our true nature, very deep within ourselves, is our spirituality, is our Buddha nature, is our true nature. That's what I think it means. What do you think? What do you think?
I don't know. It's an interesting turn of phrase. I wasn't going to read too much into it, but maybe there was more to it. I think it's just a descriptive term for experience.
Okay. Anybody else have an interpretation for that?
What came to mind for me, rightly or wrongly, was that as physical beings, we have sensory perceptions, and those in a way are our starting point. We're seeing things in distorted ways, perceiving in distorted ways, and the path is to perceive purely, and in the nature, recognizing the nature of our minds as the process. So it was, in my mind, just kind of that transformational feeling of ordinary perception into pure perception. But I may be projecting here. That may not have been what the text was referring to. It's just what I read into it.
French?
That line, taking perceptual experience and the nature of mind as the path, is a statement of the two truths, conditional reality and absolute truth. Perceptual experience, for all of our ordinary, limited, conditioned experiences, as Debbie was saying. The nature of mind is absolute awareness. So those are the two truths being expressed. And in the supplication to Tara, I think in the verses, it really goes into that there is, in essence, no difference. It's just a distinction we make. If we take the distinction to be really real, that's not quite right.
I think that's very good. Thank you. Anybody else?
I think it's a good message for those of us that might poo-poo our current experience of daily life as something that needs to be transcended as quickly as possible. I think the statement suggests that our experience of daily life as it is part of the path.
I think that's good too. Mm-hmm. Okay. Remember, this is our time to talk about these things. So don't be shy. You know, there's no wrong answer. There's no wrong question. You know, this is a means to have a discussion. Okay. Anybody have any question about the three Buddha bodies? Everybody is good with that? Okay. All right, well then very good. Then we'll move on to the next stanza here, and says, alas, now as the intermediate state of dreams arises before me, renouncing the corpse-like insensitive sleep of delusion, I must enter free from distracting memories the state of the abiding nature of reality, cultivating the experience of inner radiance through the recognition, emanation, and transformation of dreams. I must not sleep like a beast, but cherish the experiential cultivation which mingles sleep with actual realization. So this is interesting. You know, as we know about the 6 Bardos, this Bardo of living, that we also have this Bardo of dreams, that we experience the Bardo of reality. We can experience the totality of being a human being in our dreams, and it's involuntary. And when we go to sleep, all our senses are turned off. We don't feel things, we don't see things, we don't hear things, we're not aware of things, and so on. But we begin to have these experiences because our brain is still working. It's working in a dream state. And it becomes a mirror of what has happened in our waking state. But also it becomes a window into our true state, into the Bardo of reality state. What do you think about the idea of sleeping like a beast? What does that mean to you? Anybody have a comment on that? How does a beast sleep? Joanna, you got an idea on that? No idea at all? Okay. Johnny, you appear twice on my screen. That's that's okay. Now it just popped up. Now it corrected itself, I think. Gary, how about you? What do you think about sleeping like a beast? How does a beast sleep?
Well, sometimes I think that that's exactly what I do.
Yeah, what does that mean?
I dream more lately, particularly, say within the past year or so, than I used to dream. I remember that I dream. I remember that they were vivid, and I remember sometimes that they were disturbing, but I don't remember details.
You think that's the way a beast sleeps?
I don't know. I know what the word beast to me, the connotation of the word beast to me is not necessarily a rest, but that may be the opposite of what it means in the context of this piece.
Okay. Paul, what would you say? Or Paul doesn't have a microphone. So you do sign language. Okay. Deborah, how about you? Debbie McLaughlin?
Well, when I read this, I instantly thought of a collie dog, beloved pet we had. And we actually had two, Karma and Shadow. You know, Karma follows you like a shadow. So that was the name of our collies. And they would sleep, and mainly sleep very soundly, just out of sheer physical exhaustion from all their running around. But then their paws would twitch as if they were chasing something. And the feeling that I always had in watching them sleep was that it was at a very instinctive level of kind of physically renewing themselves and maybe having a little bit of extra energy leaking out, but that it was at that instinctual level, and that it would be very surprising to emerge from a sleep like that, feeling as if you'd been aware that you were a dog, and you were aware that you were a spiritual being. There was no sense of that in watching them sleep. So that's what came to mind.
Okay. Does anybody else have another point of view on this? Go ahead, Louisa.
I'm just thinking out loud here. In my mind, I would think that a beast sleeps not in deep sleep, but restless, very restless. One eye open, the other closed, always thinking that another beast bigger than that beast will come after him or her. And so it's never a very restful sleep at all for a beast. That's just what I'm thinking. Restless.
Okay. Adrian, how about you?
Hi everyone. Hi Lance.
Hi.
Yeah, that's what kind of like what I'm thinking too. When I hear sleeping like a beast, kind of like always being worried that something else is going to grab me and harm me. And I have to, I'm sorry, I forgot who said that, having to keep an eye open for things that are coming after me and not having a pleasant type of sleep with dreaming. So yeah, this is kind of like what comes to my mind.
Okay. Barbara, you had your hand up before. Oh, we're not hearing you. Your microphone seems to be off, but at the same time, we're not hearing you, or it seems to be on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I was thinking about like my dog Boris. When he sleeps, he can get, even though it looks like he's in a deep sleep, he'll get very restless, and sometimes he'll whine and he'll look like he's running. So he thinks that what he is seeing in his dream is reality, and not realizing that it's just the nature of his mind. So what's happening is he thinks that it actually is something that's happening he needs to be fearful of or run away from, instead of realizing, oh, it's just the nature of my mind. But he's a beast, so he's ignorant of that type of realizations. That's what I think when I read that.
Okay, good. Does anybody else have another comment that you want to make in this regard? William, go ahead.
Yeah, we've got 2 dogs and 2 cats, and they seem to be both similar in the way that they rest and sleep, although the cat is awake most of the night. The dogs, they seem to get into real deep sleep, and they seem to be able to get into sleep where they have, like she was just talking about, where they seem to be running and chasing other animals and whimpering and different things like that. But then in the blink of an eye, they can be standing up, facing the door, ready to get whatever is coming at the door that they've heard. They do not seem to be like I am. I go to sleep and that's pretty much it until I wake up. And for people to try to wake me up, it's very difficult to wake up. And the beasts are, like you're talking about, trying to be, trying to save themselves, or trying to be up on whatever is going on.
Okay, good. Thank you. I always think about, wild animals, that live in the jungles. And if you can, that this was written, 1,200, 1,500 years ago, when everybody was living in, in villages, and right outside the village were these jungles, and there were these wild animals. And if you ventured in the nighttime out and startled one of those animals, they would immediately wake up and attack you, or attack another animal who invaded its territory, and so on like that. So I think of it as that they're sleeping very lightly. They don't sleep very deeply. And then for us to be able to really experience the deep sleep, we have to get through the sentence that it says, just before I sleep like a beast, it says, I must enter free from distracting memories, the state of the abiding nature of reality. So the distracting memories are what's happened during the day, or what you may be anticipating for tomorrow, your anxiety, in other words. So the idea is that our first part of our sleep, is based on those daily experiences. And maybe we wake up 2 o'clock in the morning, and then I had this dream, and and I can interpret that very easily because it had to do with my phone call that I made today that was very unpleasant or something like that. But then you relax, you go back to sleep, and then 4 or 5 o'clock in the morning, you have your deep sleep. And this is where you have that like transformative kind of a sleep. This is where you have those dreams that need some kind of an analysis, some kind of a deep explanation that are very, very symbolic. And this is that window into our true nature. So this is my interpretation of that. Curtis?
I'm just looking carefully at the text. I must not sleep like a beast. The line before it describes what the kind of sleep we're trying to do. So if you just reword it and you say, if you don't have the experience of interradiance, you don't recognize, emanate, and transform dreams, then you're sleeping like a beast. But the thing I'm a little confused about is the intermediate state is of dreams. There's no mention of the deep sleep state where there's no dreaming. That's really not on the table here, I don't think.
Well, the intermediate state is just referring to the Bardo. It's just it's a phrase that means Bardo.
But it's a state of dreams, not of deep sleep where there's no dream.
How do you know?
Well, I'm not sure. That it seems to have no reference to sleeping where there's no dreams.
Okay. Well, all this is a means to be able to provoke contemplation. So, through experience, through thinking about this, contemplating this, and so on, and going through the purification of our preconceived ideas and our habitual tendencies, we begin to get to the absolute truth. So this is all designed to help us to do that.
I guess my question is deep sleep considered part of the Bardo of dreaming?
Yes.
I think maybe the last line is where it perhaps bridges into sleep, Curtis. I'm not sure, but sleep is mentioned twice. The first time it does seem more tied to dreams because of the mention of delusion. But the last reference in the last line is mingling sleep with actual realization. So maybe that's the kind of jumping off point there in a teasing kind of way.
Okay. Jane, did you have a point?
Yes. I was looking at, like Curtis, the sentence before, and I didn't look at the beast as an animal. I looked at it as we go to sleep and we have worries and fears and troubles and anxieties, and we carry those forth, and we have this horrible sleep and wake up with nightmares and so many fears and sweats, and it's not a restful sleep. And that's what I was thinking of as the beast, because the sentence before says we want to have this beautiful experience through the dreams with inner radiance and recognition and transformation. And I just look at the beast as everything of the negative, all the negativity that we don't let go of and carry into our sleep. And that's how I look at the beast.
Yeah, I
Not an
agree with
animal, the negativity.
I see, yes.
Too many dogs in the group.
Okay. Anybody else?
It's interesting, they call it the intermediate state of dreams. They don't call it the intermediate state of sleep.
Okay. Okay, so you see, we can really get, into these words, phrases, sentences into these stanzas, they're all packed full of meaning.
And the kind of stepping back overarching feeling for me of this verse is the idea of bringing intentionality to dreaming and sleeping. And instead of that just being a time when I'm kind of turning off and just waiting to wake up the next day and thinking of my spiritual path as just being when I'm awake, it's saying no, it's literally 24/7, and I can bring intention and the methods of dream and sleep yoga to bringing those hours onto the path. And it's really pretty amazing. I mean, these verses are just so panoramic that I find them stunning, but this one in particular.
So yeah, so in the 6 yogas of Naropa, one of the yogas is sleep, is dreams. So yeah, so it's very powerful. It's a window into our true nature, and it's involuntary. Or it's involuntary to a point. We can kind of get ourselves set up for it, and then we just surrender to the sleep. And if we're prepared for it, it's very good. But like I think you just said, for ordinary people, they're just, it's just they're turning off for the night and forgetting about it. But if you prepare yourself for it, you're going to prepare yourself for this adventure that you're going to have in this sleep and so on. And how do you want that adventure to go? Okay, so if we can, let's move on to the next stanza. So the next stanza on page 3, now as the intermediate state of meditative concentration arises before me, renouncing the mass of distractions and confusions, I must undistractedly enter a state which is devoid of subjective apprehension and free from the two extremes, and attain stability in the stages of generation and perfection. At this moment, having renounced activity, having attained a singular concentration, I must not fall under the sway of bewildering mental afflictions. So what does this mean to you? Lavorka, you haven't, can I call on you? Have you thought about this at all? Well, she may not. Yes.
Sorry, Lance, I'm not able to concentrate.
Okay.
Can I ask, what do they mean by the two extremes?
The two extremes,
Yeah.
the extreme of nihilism and eternalism,
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you.
where nothing matters, and the other is everything does matter.
Could it be the two extremes of samsara and nirvana?
No, I think it's
No, they're not extremes. So the meditative concentration is willful. The dreams is like a surrender. The meditation is very controlled. If we do meditation properly, it goes through stages, and we have to prepare for each of those stages. So it's very, very, very well organized and so on to get the benefit of the meditation. So we have to be devoid of subjective apprehension and free from the two extremes, renouncing the mass of distractions and confusions, attain stability in the stages of generation and perfection.
Yeah, what's that?
So it's very controlled. So both of these, the dreams and the meditation, both happen in the waking Bardo. They're part of the waking Bardo. So as human beings in the waking Bardo, we have all this stuff happening. And when we go to sleep, then we have this seemingly involuntary thing happening, or we have this very organized thing through our meditation, through our focus of the meditation. But it comes as part of the waking state. It comes part of that Bardo. Any other comments?
Yeah, you know, let's not forget, and I'm trying to think of what it is that I'm not trying to forget here. Lucid dreaming. Because in lucid dreaming, we realize that we're in a dream state. And we realize that we're dreaming, but we also control the state because we do realize that we're dreaming, and we control the dream to go different directions, or what we want it to the end product of the dream to be. We control this. So lucid dreaming, I think, fits in here somewhere.
Yeah, well, I think that's the union of that's the yoga of dreams, of the 6 yogas of Naropa. Lucid dreaming is another way of saying that, of being able to develop that. It's a practice.
Okay.
Jerry,
Lance,
Yes, did somebody have a comment? Was that Jerry wanted to say something? Yes.
yeah, something kind of if it's the perception that we get from this book is that we're not living in a reality, then in a sense, nothing we do, whether it be in a dream state or in an active state, is real. So what I'd like to know, and I hope that these teachings is going to tell us to be able to make a difference between the fact that this is not reality. The reality is someplace out there after death, maybe. So we need to figure out how to make these tough decisions. I hope the teachers teach us this, because I don't have the slightest idea.
Well, you're correct. And that's what this is. This is the liberation by hearing. So we're learning about what all this is, that we see all this phenomenal nature. We have all these appearances, but we're attached to all these things. This is why we have this life in the first part. So for us to be liberated means that we have to let go of all this. But until we can understand the essence of what all this is, we subliminally are holding on to these things, or we have aversions to them.
That's right.
So the whole means of the Bardo Thodol is to recognize all this stuff so that we can let it go.
So in a sense, nothing we're faced with, whether it be politics or people trying to sell us things or our illnesses, is real. And in a sense, let me get that thought back. If it doesn't go back in 10 seconds, we'll move on. But
well, it's temporarily real.
Yeah, like dreams, and we talked about going into deeper states of dream. How about out-of-body experiences where you actually meet up with higher spirits or negative entities or Buddha?
Well, that's an interesting thing, and I think we'll get to that later on.
Okay, I'll back off. But it's nice to just bring it up because, gee whiz, you got to get into it the deeper and say what's going on. So I'm looking forward to it. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
I have one more thought on the this sort of threshold between these 2 pages. I think the last statement on page 1 suggests that there's that there's a membrane in here that's permeable. So the last line says cherishing the experiential cultivation, which suggests that we begin to have some intent there, so that we're actually cultivating this space in which sleep mingles with what we call real. But so I see it as a membrane that's permeable. So there's lots of stuff passing back and forth. And I think as we move into the next intermediate state, I think it's much the same. It's not like a door opens and a door shuts. It's like we approach another membrane that also has bits and pieces and bobs of each involved in each state. So it's more gradual than a line in the sand. At least that's what I'm getting from reading it.
Yeah, that's good simile.
Michael, are you saying that we basically are still taking inputs from the physical world or this Bardo of existence while we're still in the Bardo of dreams?
I think that I think it sort of must be. I think it must be, because when we think about, well, there's real here and not real there, and Jerry was true in sort of trying to nail that down, that one side or the other, neither is real. But when we're thinking about real, we're thinking about being in phenomena, in the world of phenomena and form. And I think that stuff trails us, I believe, from one state to the other, so that we're never 100% on one side of the membrane.
All right, so let's look at the next stanza, because now we're looking at that permeable membrane, from the standpoint of death. It says, alas, now as the intermediate state of the time of death arises before me, where we're going through what we would say life and then the afterlife. Renouncing all attachments, yearning, and subjective apprehension in every respect, I must undistractedly enter the path on which the oral teachings are clearly understood, and eject my own awareness into the uncreated expanse of space. Eject my own awareness into the uncreated expanse of space. Immediately upon separation from this compounded body of flesh and blood, I must know this body to be like a transient illusion. So all these appearances, all these apparitions, all these habitual tendencies are just mind fabrications. And when we're going through that bardo of death, that transition of death, which happens very quickly, it's the shortest, it's the smallest span of time that these bardos occur in. And it's very charged. There's a great deal of potential for things of changing. So we have to be prepared for that. So what do you think about that? Does anybody else have some comments who hasn't spoken yet? Love to hear from somebody else. John, Dan Miller, Lisa, Kate. Okay, well, anybody else have any comments? What do you think about that?
I just wanted to say that the previous mention of permeability is really helpful in reading this, because you realize when it says, I must undistractedly enter the path on which the oral teachings are clearly understood. Well, it's probably a little late at the time of death to say, whoops, I better understand them, if you hadn't studied them and digested them during your lifetime. They wouldn't be in you perhaps, or accessible in the way you would need them at the time of death. And so that whole idea that you're not wasting any time, that you're meditating while you're living, that you're using your dreams and sleep while you're living, that all of that is creating that basis of understanding that's then there for you when you die, is just really speaking to that whole idea of permeability. So thank you. That was really helpful to hear that. That one word was a zinger.
I think the idea of abiding, where do we live? Where do we abide in the virtue of our practices? Do we abide in the wisdom of our practices and the wisdom of our the positive changes that we made in our lives, or we abide in some kind of nebulous fearfulness of full of doubt, of not sure where we are? What's our ground? Are we abiding in our spirituality? So the idea is that when we come to the Bardo of death, are we already the embodiment of that enlightenment? So that when the death comes to our physical body. The death comes to our brain, to our intellect. But the spiritual body is deathless. But are we ignoring that and we're clinging on to the physicality, into the intellectual, into the intellectual, so that when we go into the Bardo of death, it's conflicted. It's like when you're trying to go to sleep and you're agitated, you have anxiety, you're worried about something, and you can't fall asleep. And maybe you all know people who have been going through the dying process and are just holding on for weeks. They're holding on. Maybe they've come close to death 4 or 5 times over 6 months or something like that, and they won't let go because that they're afraid. They'll tell you, "I'm afraid."
Quick question, Lance.
Sure.
The uncreated expanse of space is Dharmadhatu?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
I like where it says eject my own awareness, which means you have to realize what's going on and to move on, go.
Yes.
I think that's really good.
Yes, this is the POA.
Yeah.
So the POA is built into this.
Yeah.
That transformation, what do they call it? The transference of consciousness. Okay, so now we've identified the Bardo of living and the Bardo of dreams and the Bardo of meditation are part of the Bardo of living. Now the fourth Bardo is the Bardo of death. That transformation, that permeability of moving from one to the other now. And then we get to the next stanza where it says, "Alas, now, as the intermediate state of reality arises before me, renouncing the merest sense of awe, terror, or fear, I must recognize all that arises to be awareness, manifesting naturally of itself. Know such sounds, lights, and rays to be visionary phenomena of the intermediate state. At this critical moment, having reached this critical point, I must not fear the assembly of peaceful and wrathful deities which manifests peacefully, which manifests naturally." So anybody have a comment on this Bardo of reality? So this is the what we might call the afterlife, the other side of our life. And the crazy thing about this is we've been there many times. You know, if you subscribe to the idea of reincarnation, then that just begs the question of where were you before you were born and where do you go when you die? And it's the same place. Where you go before you're born, or where you come from and where you go is the same place, is that Bardo of reality. And it's just pure spirit. And it's so subtle and it's non-conceptual. So there's nothing to remember.
Also, this is when one recognizes his own nature of mind. Is that what the state of reality is identified with?
Say it again.
Is this the same with the nature of mind?
Well, the nature of mind is a conceptual idea. That we have this mind, that we have this awareness of the non-conceptual. We have a perception of what we think it is, but we're thinking in our mind what we think it is. You know, but this idea of mind itself, that there is this mind that moves through all things, we can use that as a simile. But if we hold on to it, then it becomes an object of grasping, of clinging, like anything else that we cling to.
Right. I guess I'm just merely asking if sometimes the state of reality is also referred as, you know, nature of mind.
In some places, sure, it is.
Okay.
But is that ultimate?
It is not ultimate. Yeah,
Okay.
I completely see what you're saying. Yes.
So the state of reality is you know, you could say it's the other side of living, you know. And then when we begin to meditate and really have deep meditative experience, and if you know the story of the Buddha, and when the Buddha attained enlightenment, and he sat underneath the tree, and after 6 years of being in the woods and all that, and then he goes through where the demons come and so on, and then he has this experience of seeing, of recognizing, of realizing, of become aware of all the lives of all beings, of all what nature is. And he begins to see all this totality of temporality, of corporality, temporariness. And he sees all the illusion. He sees the emptiness of all this thought. He sees the mind. He sees the emptiness of mind. And then he's asked to teach, you know, what is enlightenment? And he says, I can't tell you. I can only tell you, I can teach you how it is that how I experience that. And you have to experience it yourself. But it's beyond expression. It can only be experienced. So this Bardo reality is that when we come back, when we're reborn again, we come back with this notion of love, this notion of wisdom. We start qualifying out of our inability to be able to say anything else about it. Our ego won't let us just say, I don't know, or won't let us go through life saying, I don't know. So we begin to make up all these stories about what life is and who we are and so on like that we ultimately let go, and we've done many times when we've died many times. And the experience of going to sleep is very much rehearsal for that. The experience of going into meditation practice is rehearsal for death. If we are interrupted, if we are allowing our distractions to block us from that transition into sleep, from that transition into meditation, is the same of having that blockage of going into the Bardo of reality, of going into our spiritual nature. And then if we can't remain there, then we come back into being born again, because we couldn't handle that degree of freedom, because the reality is another way of explaining it, another simile for it is freedom. So are we afraid of that? Do we have terror of that? Do we have fear of that? Do we have unanswered questions for ourselves? Things that we wanted to have? Things that we say, oh, in next life, I'd like to be able to do this. I'd like to be a spiritual person. Next time, I'd like to be a rich person. Next time, I'd like to be a man or a woman or something else, you know. So we're kind of formulating our next life already, where we want it to go. Or are we ready to just say, I just want to be free, free of the mind, free of all things that the mind can conceive of?
My issue is when we're born and we forget our prior lives. So we're kind of, what do you call it, when you forget everything? You just have no memory, and you come into when you leave, it sounds like if you're separated from your mind, then you have no thoughts either, and you should have no fears. You know what I mean? That's my mind. So you're on the other side and you say, where am I? Who am I? You know, people who have amnesia are frightened, but they also have their brain over there. So if you go over to the other side, and I guess it'll be explained in the future, when you first meet these deities and these Buddhas, you shouldn't have any fear. If you have no mind, you're just all, and you don't even know about your past either, your past lives. So I'm trying to understand the process, which I hope will be explained in the future.
Yeah. But then, you know, this notion of having past lives, is that just a fabrication that we're creating for ourselves? It's just
Very
another
good.
game. Michael?
Just waving at somebody.
Oh, okay. Anybody else have a comment about that? About this state of reality?
Jerry, you had mentioned that we have no recollection or memory of what we were in the past. But your life right now is a huge answer to what you were in your past. I mean, if you were a decent human being or a decent animal or whatever you were, you have this wonderful opportunity now with this precious human life. So you must have done something really good. So what you're doing now will prepare you for your, for your next life, whatever it may be. So, you know, you everyone here has really been given a really precious opportunity to recognize and to be on the path. So if we die, we should have no fear because we're practicing for death. That's what we're doing right now. And for the ignorant that's not practicing, there's tremendous fear, tremendous awe. So really, we are so fortunate.
So when we begin to recognize this phenomenal nature as a display of reality, but it's a temporary display of reality. We're just a temporary, it's like a movie screen. And at some point the light goes out and all the images just disappear. And then it becomes all non-conceptual. So this is what we are preparing for. You know, in the Judeo-Christian, you know, I think it's really good the way, you know, they talk about when you go and you Judgment Day, and you go and you're ushered to go meet the Creator. And if you have any kind of trepidation, if you have any kind of fear that there's this Creator that has this bright light or whatever you want to, however you think about it, and maybe we naturally cower because we don't feel like we are worthy to be able to be in presence of this. And we find some way to hide. We're born again. Or are we that whatever that light is, whatever that brightness is, whatever that truth is, if we are the same as that truth, or we are the same as that light, we just completely, it's like a child running into its mother's lap, or water being poured into water. It's our natural state.
Question,
So
Lance.
there's no consciousness involved. It is just our true nature. Go ahead, Michael.
Are we asked to imagine then, at least for up to 49 days, that some of our sense of being, our sense of being an individual or a touch of our ego remains intact and active in and around our body until we get to the point where we actually pull the ejection cord? So isn't that sort of what it suggests, that you know, that we, as we experience fear, we're recognizing images that we think we're supposed to be afraid of, and we are mixed up because we still have a sense of our history with us until a certain point further down the line of the transition. Do you think so?
Well, that's what's, you know, written here as being symbolic of the experience of being in the Bardo like that. Yes. And, you know, if like I said, when you go into the Bardo of death, if you're not the embodiment of that light, if you're not the embodiment of that supreme being, if you want to call it that, if you're not the embodiment of that love or whatever name you might have for it, then you're something else. And that something else has ego in it, has a mental aspect, and you remain a mental body. And the mental body is the drama that is going through the Bardo experience. We're doing it in this living way, but then that can continue. And in the Bardo of reality, in this Bardo that we're talking about, but there are things there. There are we'll see that there are rescues. There are spiritual bodies that are there to be able to liberate you, to liberate that mental body, that mental body from its clinging and attachments to that mental body, to the ego. So I know that sounds really crazy, but this is what we learn by being able to study spirituality. Spirituality is a system to understand something as a human being, that has no explanation. It's an experience.
The way that I see it, if I may say this, Lance,
Sure.
the way that I see it is that what we are afraid of in the Bardo of death is our residual karma, because that's the only thing that we're taking with us, and that is our afflictive emotions, desire, attachment, and since we're bringing that with us, just as Lance was saying, we're not identifying ourselves with that pure light because we're not pure. We haven't purified ourselves, and that's, at least again, the way that I see it, those are the things that we are either feel attracted to or we feel aversion towards. Those are our fears.
That's correct. You're right. So understanding karma, cause and effect, is the wind that is blowing us through that Bardo experience. If we haven't become that light, if we haven't become that non-conceptuality. So we need to understand that.
It's interesting that the line says, renouncing the merest sense of awe, terror, or fear. That word merest is really popping out for me, because it goes back to what you said, Lance, that if there's even a little bit of ego there, a little bit of ego fearing the karma, as Adrian was saying, that's enough to prevent you from being able to be in the nature of mind. And it's such a challenge, because then, of course, that merest sense of ego means that liberation is too overwhelming, too frightening. And so you'll run and hide in the next life. I hadn't thought of it before, but I guess it's like we're in this endless game of hide and seek with ourselves, life
That's
after
right.
life.
And the meditation practice, you see, is rehearsal for that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we are different people than we were at 6:30 tonight. We've all had new thoughts. We've all heard new things. We're different than we were just an hour and a half ago. So in that sense, we're reborn. We're going through death, rebirth all the time. Sometimes it's very, very superficial, but in this case, it's much more profound, and can be a turning point in our lives. And we begin to take our spirituality more seriously and our meditation practices more seriously. You begin to see how all this now is fitting together. Remember, this is the table on which all those practices rest. Because it's those practices that are teaching us how to recognize our karma, how to recognize the ego, and how to purify all of that, to let go of all that. So that when we go into the Bardo of death, when we go into the Bardo of reality, it's just like being home. I've been there already. I've been practicing for this. I didn't even notice it, as a matter of fact. Okay, so let's move on to the next one here. So we're on page 5. It says, alas now, as the intermediate state of rebirth, the 6th Bardo, the intermediate state of rebirth arises before me. I must, with one pointed intention, concentrate my mind with one pointed intention, single pointed concentration. Have you heard this anywhere in any of our practices? Developing single pointed meditation. And resolutely connect with the residual potency of my virtuous past actions. So karma is still working here. the state of rebirth. I couldn't stay in the Bardo of reality. I couldn't stay in that Bardo of freedom. I still have ego. The karma winds are still blowing, and they're moving me in this direction. So I need to find the residual potency of my virtuous past actions, not my non-virtuous. It's my non-virtuous that's making us go that way. But there was also virtue. We here, when we were born, we had these karmic winds. We obviously had good, virtuous karmic winds. Otherwise, we wouldn't be where we are right now. We would have died 16 times over, or we'd be killing people or stealing from people and everything. By virtue of the fact that we're here means that we have some really good virtue. But we still have doubts. We still have confusions and habitual tendencies and so on that need to be purified. That's why we're here too. But it's our virtue here that it's saying to connect with that residual potency in my virtuous past actions. I must obstruct the womb entrance and call to mind the methods of reversal, because all during the time that we're in the Bardo of reality, our Bardo of freedom that I talked about, there's these spiritual beings who are there with great compassion to rescue us, to bring us back to remembering our practices, our Dharma practices. Yes.
When you say we're all here, because we've done virtuous things, and I'm assuming that you're not saying that everything we've ever done is virtuous, but because we've done virtuous things, what do you mean by we? Does that include everyone in the world? Does it include just this group, which I doubt? Who does it include?
Well, for right now, I'm just looking at this group that we're having this discussion with right now. You know, but there's many, 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 many others. But there's many more who have no clue.
Now, the point behind my question, I think, with the people you just referred to, there are a lot of people in the collective we who are doing very bad things.
That's right. I'm not referring to them.
And then some of us have done things we regret.
Indeed. We have that to deal with, but by virtue of the virtual or the virtuous deeds that we have done is why we're here right now, listening to this and talking about this right now. And that's the difference I'm trying to point out. Does that make sense, Gary?
Yeah, I'm following you.
Okay. So it says to obstruct the womb entrance and call to mind the methods of reversal. So there's these opportunities when we're in these 49 days to be rescued from having to be reborn, to remain in the Bardo, to remain free, to not be born again. So this is what it's talking about. These methods of reversal. Reversal to be born, to go back into the womb. This is the time when perseverance and purity of perception are imperative. So this means understanding the dynamics of what is happening, what the spirituality is all about. And this is one of the things that this tradition of Buddhism, and I'm not denigrating Christianity or Judaism or Islam or Hinduism, because it's all there too. But in Buddhism, it is very well articulated. This is one of the great things about Buddhism, is this body of knowledge that is 2,600 years old, that is based on this timelessness of wisdom, of true nature, that we have the benefit of, that we can recall this. We have to go back to this. This is what we are learning on the table and so on. This is the time when perseverance to maintain that and purity of perception are imperative to recall where we are. And we start developing that in our waking state, to remember this temporary nature, to remember what all this is, and see that it's all part of reality, although this is the temporary part of reality. And to take that with us as part of our mental body, that when we're going through the Bardo, that becomes our salvation, so to speak. And you'll see how that works. I must give up all jealousy and meditate on my spiritual teacher with consort. I must give up all jealousy, because here, this is an emotion, jealousy. It's one of the 5 poisons, this jealousy. Oh, I'm not that. I want to be that. And because I have that clinging to that, it's what pulls me back. I must give up that jealousy. I don't need to be that. I can let that go. I meditate on my spiritual teacher with consort. So you'll see the visualizations that we develop, we practice over and over again to stabilize that, which is all part of us, which is within ourselves. All this is happening within ourselves. You know, this whole drama is within our heart, and the drama, the emotions are in the brain. So this is the state of rebirth, you know, and we can be born. You know, it says that there's 4 modes of rebirth. There's the womb birth, which is what we would want to be, but there's womb birth could be born. You can be born an animal, a horse or a dog or a lion or any of the mammals. But there's an egg birth. We can be born as poultry, as birds, or reptiles. Same family, isn't it? Or we can be born of heat and moisture. Where do the insects come from but larvae? You know, that's on the pond or on the leaves of a tree or in the ground, and every 17 years the cicadas come up. Or to be born a miraculous birth, which is very interesting. And we'll talk about that. But there's miraculous birth. There can be a virtuous miraculous birth, and there's non-virtuous miraculous birth. So we need to be able to control that. We need to be able to be in control of each of those births. We want to be, if we have to be reborn, let's be reborn as a human being. There we have the opportunity, we have the chance to change. That's what we're all doing right now, is we're changing. We're changing our minds. We're changing our lives. So we give up jealousy and meditate on my spiritual teacher, which we practice many times in our waking life. So the 6 bardos are the living bardo, the dream bardo, and the waking and the meditative bardo, and then the bardo of death, and then the bardo of reality, which is this huge bardo, and then the bardo of becoming, the bardo of rebirth, coming back, because we're not free enough to remain in the bardo of reality. We come back into this complicated, compounded nature. But we make the best out of that. If we're going to come back, let's come back and help other beings. And by helping other beings, we help ourselves. Because if we didn't have the wherewithal to be able to stay in the bardo of reality, it's because we weren't pure enough. We weren't free enough. So now we can begin to recognize what those impurities were. what those non-virtues were, and we can begin to work on them when we come back into the Bardo of living. And if we dedicate everything that we do in order to purify those things, we do that for the benefit of others. Now we're not grasping to it. We're not holding on to it with our ego. We're not clinging onto it with our ego. So we've given ourselves this gift of life because we've obviously come from this Bardo of reality, but we had enough good karma to get us to this point now, despite whatever negative karma we may have had at that time. And we're working on it to purify it. And the more that we give it away, the more that we dedicate to others, we find the freer we become, the happier we become, the happier other beings become as a result. Can you see that dynamic working? So I'm sorry, we've gone past 9 o'clock. Can we stay a few more minutes?
I can.
Okay. All right. So then we'll come back. We'll pick up here next week. But now we go to page 207 in our book. Okay. So Adrian, will you read page 207? And then Joanna, will you read page 208? And then Gary, will you read page 209? Barbara, will you read page 210? Let me see. Michael, will you read 211? Dan Miller, Lisa, John, are you guys capable of reading?
Yes, I am.
All right, Dan, will you read page 213?
Okay.
And then we're on page 214. Lisa, can you read?
I think you skipped 212, Lance.
Did I skip 212? Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. Lisa, she's not answering. John, can you read 212? No? Okay. I'll read 212. Okay. 212 to where were we? 213. We're on 214. Okay. Debbie, will you read 214? 215. Tom, will you read 215, please? And then Jerry, will you read page 216? And Louisa, you got a page to read, correct? Louisa, you got a page to read? Okay. Where was I, on 217?
No, I don't.
Or Louisa, you didn't get a page?
No.
All right, you read page 217, please, and page 218.
Oops.
217 and 218. And I got to count on you guys to remember your page assignments because I was trying to follow some order, but I kind of got a little mixed up. All right, so page 207, who began with that?
I do.
Okay.
Aspirational prayer, which rescues from the dangerous pathways of the intermediate states. I bow down to the spiritual teachers, meditational deities, and dakinis. May I be guided on the path of their great love. Oh, as I roam in the cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated bewilderment, may the spiritual teachers, holders of the oral lineages, draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant, clear light, which is undistracted study, reflection, and meditation. May the supreme consorts, the host of dakinis, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state. and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated delusion, may the transcendent Lord Vairocana draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant blue light, which is the pristine cognition of reality's expanse.
May the Supreme Consort Akasa Datasvari support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of the utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated aversion, may the transcendent Lord Vajrasattva Akshobhya draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant white light, which is the mirror-like pristine cognition. May the Supreme Consort Buddha, Lokana, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated pride, may the transcendent Lord Ratnasambhava draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant yellow light, which is the pristine cognition of sameness.
May the Supreme Consort Mamaki support me from behind, and thus encircled, may be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated attachment, may the transcendent Lord Amitabha draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant red light, which is the pristine cognition of discernment. May the Supreme Consort Padaravasini support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated envy, may the transcendent Lord Amoghasiddhi draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant green light, which is the pristine cognition of accomplishment. May the Supreme Consort Samayatara support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha.
Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by the 5 virulent poisons, may the transcendent conquerors, the male Buddhas of the 5 enlightened families, draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is the 4 pristine cognitions combined. May the 5 supreme female Buddhas, the purity of the expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the light paths of the 6 impure classes of beings and be escorted to the 5 utterly supreme and pure Buddha fields. Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated habitual tendencies, may the assembly of spiritual heroes and awareness holders draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant multicolored light, which is co-emergent pristine cognition. May the Supreme Consorts, the hosts of Dakini, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha.
Oh, as I roam in cyclic existence, driven by deep-seated bewildering perceptions, may the assembly of blood-drinking wrathful deities draw me forward, leading me on the path of radiant rainbow light, which is free of fear and terrifying perceptions. May the assembly of the Kuroshvari, queens of the expanse, support me from behind, and thus encircled, may I be rescued from the fearsome passageway of the intermediate state and be escorted to the level of an utterly perfect Buddha. Om, Om. May the fields of the 5 elements not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as fields of the 5 Buddhas. May the elements of space not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the blue Buddha.
May the elements of water not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the white Buddha. May the elements of earth not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the yellow Buddha. May the elements of fire not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the red Buddha. May the elements of wind not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the field of the green Buddha. Was somebody to read 213?
May the awesome sounds, lights, and rays not arise as a hostile force. May I see them as the infinite fields of peaceful and wrathful deities. May the rainbow-colored elements not rise up as a hostile force. May I see them as the fields of the manifold Buddhas. May I recognize all sounds as my own sounds. May I recognize all lights as my own lights. May I recognize all rays as my own rays. May I spontaneously recognize their characteristics of the intermediate state. May the fields of the three Buddha bodies be manifest. Samaya.
Aspirational prayer, which protects from fear of the intermediate states. When my life's course is ended and I roam alone in the intermediate states, the loved ones of this world can no longer help me. So at this critical time, may the conquerors, the peaceful and wrathful deities, quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the deep darkness of my ignorance be dispelled. When I roam alone, separated from my loved ones, and myriad images of emptiness arise, naturally manifesting, may the Buddhas quickly release the power of their compassion, and may the fear of the awesome and terrifying intermediate state be annulled. When the 5 radiant lights of pristine cognition dawn, may I recognize them as my own nature, and without awe and without terror, and as the manifold forms of the peaceful and wrathful deities arise, may I be fearlessly confident and recognize the characteristics of the intermediate states.
When I experience suffering as a result of negative past action, may the great compassionate one dispel all such misery. And as the natural sound of reality reverberates like 1,000 peals of thunder, may all sounds be heard as the teaching to the greater vehicle. When I am driven on by past actions, unable to find a refuge, may the meditational deities dispel all such misery. And as I experience the suffering of habitual tendencies and past actions, may the meditative stabilities of inner radiance and bliss naturally arise. When I am miraculously born into the intermediate state of rebirth, may I not be beguiled by the perverse prophecies of Mara. And as I freely arrive at every place that I think of, may the bewildering fear and terror generated by my negative past actions not arise.
When the roars of savage wild beasts echo around me, may their cries be transformed into the sound of the sacred teachings, the 6 syllables, Om Mani Padme Hum. And as I am engulfed by snow, rain, wind, and darkness, may I achieve the pure clairvoyance of radiant, pristine cognition. May sentient beings in the intermediate state, similar to, in kind to myself, be born into the higher realms, free from revelry, and as severe dissonant mental states generate insatiable hunger and thirst, may the inflictions of hunger, thirst, heat, and cold be annulled. When I see my future parents in union, may I perceive them as Mahakarunika and consort, and for the sake of others, being blessed with the power to choose a birthplace, may I achieve an exalted body adorned with the auspicious major and minor marks.
I'm sorry, who was reading page 217 and 218?
Lisa?
I'm not sure if that's me, but I just noticed something was missing, but I should go on perhaps
Okay.
217.
Yes.
Okay.
Finish 217 and 218 then.
Okay. Once I have achieved birth in a supreme human form, may I act so as to swiftly liberate all who see and hear me, and may I not be influenced by my negative past actions, but multiply and emulate my past merits. Wherever I may be born, in whatever land it may be, may I quickly encounter the meditational deity of my past lives, knowing from immediately after birth how to speak and walk. May I remember my past lives and attain the power of non-forgetfulness. May I easily come to master by study and reflection the manifold stages of learning, small, intermediate, and great. May the country into which I am born be auspicious, and may all sentient beings be blessed with happiness. O peaceful and wrathful conquerors, may I and all others become entirely at one with you and come to resemble you in all your forms, your retinues, your lifespan, and Buddha fields in every quality of your supreme auspiciousness. Through the compassion of Samanabhadra and the infinite, peaceful, and wrathful deities, by the power of truth of pure reality, and by the blessing of mantrans who practice one pointedly, may I every wish of this aspirational prayer be fulfilled. Samaya.
Very good. We have quick dedication prayers. Debbie, can you put that up, please? E Maho. In the center is the marvelous Buddha Amitabha of boundless light. On the right side is Avalokiteshvara, the Lord of great compassion. On the left is Vajrapani, the Lord of powerful means. All are surrounded by limitless Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. Immeasurable peace and happiness is the blissful, pure land of Dewa Chen. When I and all beings pass from samsara, may we be born in Dewa Chen without taking samsaric rebirth. May I have the blessing of meeting Amitabha face to face. By the power and blessings of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas of the 10 directions, may I attain this aspiration without hindrance. Teata Pensadriva Avobodhanaya Soha. Bodhicitta, the excellent and precious mind. Where it is unborn, may it arise. Where it is born, may it not decline, but ever increase higher and higher. By this virtue, may I achieve all knowingness by defeating all enemies' confusion. May all who travel on the waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death cross the ocean of samsara, cross the ocean of suffering. As Manjushri, the warrior, realized the ultimate state, and as did Samantabhadra, I will follow in their path and fully dedicate all the merit for all sentient beings. Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Om Mani Padme Hum. 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 Om Mani Padme Hum Shri. Take a deep breath. Hold it. Exhale completely. Hold the empty breath. Relax. Open your eyes and breathe normal. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Lance.
Thank you very much, Lance.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Lynn.
you, Lance. Thank you.